We're now going to have a look at how we can add a complication into our project. So we'll start by adding this to our target. And then we'll look at how we can create a timeline template to make use of in our delegate methods. And then we'll create a timeline entry that we can display on our complication. And finally, we'll look at how we can add this complication to our watch interface on one of the screens. In all the previous videos of this section, we've been working with WatchKit to implement a watchOS application. With watchOS 2, there came a new feature, which was a complication. Complications are like a little mini screenshot into the application that shows some data around it and allows you to click on that in order to go straight into the application. They can sit on many of the faces, and there are many different types of complications. So let's go into our DreamSeeker watch extension, and we're going to create a new Swift file, and we'll call this Dream Complication Controller. We'll click Create, and I'll import a new framework called ClockKit. And again, I'll import core data. Then we'll create this class, which will be Dream Complication Controller. I'll set this as a subclass of NSObject, and I'll have it conform to the CLK complication data source. Then let's create a new fetch results controller. So I'll put private lazyvar fetch results controller and S fetch results controller. And let's build our fetch results. So I'll put guard let MOC equals to core data dot shared manager dot manage object context, and then let entity equals NS entity description dot entity for name dream, pass in the MOC. Otherwise I'll return nil. Then I'll put let fetch request and create an NS fetch request and set the entity as the entity. I'll set the sort descriptors as NS sort descriptor for key name, ascending true, and then I'll create a new controller with NS fetch results controller, passing in the fetch request and the managed object context, with the other two set to nil, and then I'll return the controller. As you can see, it's throwing an error here. This is because we're not conforming to the CLK complication data source. So let's start by doing that. The first thing we're going to do is get supported time travel directions for the complication. And I only wanted to be able to go forward. So I put handler and then dot forward. Now, we'll create a new method which is going to return a complication template. So I'll create a new method called createTemplate and have that return a CLK complication template utilitarian small ring text. And within this, I'll create a new property called letTemplate and initialize that as a type CLK complication template utilitarian small ring text. There are several different types of complications, and we're only doing one here. But as you're going through, you'll want to create a number of different templates, using many of the different template types. So let's create a new do-catch statement, and have the fetch results controller perform a fetch. And then if let objects equals fetch results controller dot sections, section 0, dot number of objects, then we'll put template dot text provider equals CLK simple text provider, and pass in the number of objects into this text. Then we'll create an empty catch and we'll return the template. Now above this, we'll implement another new delegate method. And in this one, we'll put get placeholder template for complication. And we'll pass into the handler a template that we get from the createTemplate method. Now we want to get the current timeline entry for the complication. So let's put get current timeline entry. And then we'll put let template equals createTemplate. Then we'll create a new entry, which will be CLK complication timeline entry. We'll pass in the date as now, and the complication template as the template. And then, within the handler, we'll pass back the entry. Now there are a couple more delegate methods that we want to put in here, which is that we want to get one for the initial date and the end date. So we'll put get timeline start date for complication, and for the handler, we'll then pass back NS date initialized. And then we'll put get timeline end date for complication. And within the handler, we'll create let current equals NS date. And in the handler, we'll put timeline current dot date by adding time interval. And we'll set this as 24 times 60 times 60, which will give us 24 hours. Then we'll go to our assets and create a new watch complication. This watch complication allows us to assign assets to our complications. We're not going to do this here, but it's good for you to know exactly where you would put your assets if you want them to appear on the watch face. Then let's go to the DreamSeeker project. Within the data source class that we get on the General tab for our watch extension, we're going to put the data source class as Dream Complication Controller. But then before this, we're going to put the product module name within brackets with a $sign before it. Then we'll select Utilitarian Small, and the complications group will be Complication. Then one last thing that we want to do is that we want to try to force it to update whenever we get any kind of information through from our core data. So I'll put Import ClockKit in the extension delegate. Then I'll scroll down to the bottom, and within the extension delegate, WC session delegate, when new data is added, we'll put if let server equals CLK complication server dot shared instance. Let complications equals server dot active complications. Then for every complication in the complication, we'll do server dot reload timeline for complication, and we'll pass in the complication. And we'll just delete these brackets because it is a variable and not a method. Then one last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in our WatchKit icons. These are all included in your package. So I'll drag each one of these across into the relevant space. So the 48, the 55, 58 pixels all going into their relevant places. So let's run the application and see what happens. So it's built and run onto our watch. We can see that we're getting data through. Let's go on to the clock face. Now I'm going to go to Hardware, and I'm going to Force Touch Pressure and Deep Press, and this allows me to then open this up. I'll then go to a Shallow Press, and I'll click on Customize. At the top right-hand complication, I'll then click on it and start scrolling. And whenever I get down, I'll then see Dream Seeker appear. If I press on Home, which is Command-Shift-H, and then Command-Shift-H again, I can see up in the top right corner it now says 7, which is the number of dreams that we have. I press Command-Shift-Home, and I go back to the home screen, and I can see our icon. And so we've added a complication into our project. And that brings us to the end of this section. In this section, we've added a watch target to our project. And we've worked with the interface builder to create a table view and populate it with data. Then, we made use of the app group's entitlement to share classes and core data across the two targets. And we worked with WC Session to send messages and pass data. And then, we navigated through the application and passed data across using context. And finally, we implemented a complication to display data and allow users quick access to get into our app. In the next section, we're going to look at how we can use UI and unit tests to test our application code.